Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Miriam Allenson. Award-winning author Miriam Allenson writes stories about smart-mouthed women who take charge even if and especially when there's a man in the picture. Hot men populate all her books. She's been told she's a little smart-mouth herself. Miriam took a dog's age and then some to publish her first book, For the Love of the Dame. She cut the time it took her to write her next book, A Duke for Dessert, in half and she reduced it by half again, writing When the Duke Finds His Heart. These days, she finally figured out how to write fast. When Miriam is not working on a book, which is almost never, she is in the kitchen baking something, gardening on the huge 8 foot by 4 foot deck of her apartment, or adding one more character to her 400 plus Pez collection. No, she does not eat the Pez candy. She likes black licorice, but not chocolate, polenta more than pizza, and baseball any day over football. Miriam lives in northern New Jersey with her fabulous, supportive husband, Andy. One day they're going to take a cruise around the world. She'll take her laptop with her. Welcome, Miriam. Please tell us a little more about yourself and about your latest project, your Tootsie series.
Okay, so the whole business of writing fast, I'm what's called what the industry calls a pantser. In other words, a pantser is somebody who flies by the seat of their pants, and it's gotten me in trouble over the years. Why it took me 7 years to write For the Love of the Dame, because what I would do is, because I'm a lateral thinker, also I would write myself down rabbit holes with ideas that just popped into my head and I couldn't get out. So it took time. So, it was a very slow go. I imagine that I'm probably a slow learner in that respect, but I came across one of the many books that I think most serious writers will look into. And this one is called Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The idea was originally meant for screenwriters, but a woman came along. Her last name, I never remember her first name. Her last name is Brody. She took it, the basics, and she wrote it for people writing novels. And that thing just spoke to me. I can't tell you why. I think when somebody comes upon a method that works for them, to try to explain it is really beside the point. It worked. And it meant that I could take this whole business of flying by the seat of my pants and saying, okay, it's not such a terrible thing if I plan along the way. I can veer off in a direction where my characters take me, because they will take you someplace else. But because I've got this plan of action, it's a 3-act plan, but it has stops along the way. And I know what stop I'm at when I'm writing now, I should say. And if I see that I have veered too far off that particular spot, then I just pull myself back. And that certainly saves me a lot of grief. And it means that the book that I finished last year and the book that is now finished, it's first draft finished, but it's also, I would say right now, probably about halfway edited, 8 months. And I know for a fact that what's going to happen, because I have got a whole bunch of other ideas percolating, that I will be writing a whole lot faster than even that. My plan is, once I get set up with this, which will be very shortly now, is I will be writing approximately 5,000 words a day. Is that possible? Yes, it's possible if you know where you're going. The only thing that bothers you when you're writing 5,000 words a day is your wrist start saying, excuse me, could you please stop now for a while?
How many pages would 5,000 words translate to?
Okay, so now you're getting into math where I don't like to be. So I think that if you figure 250 words a page, who wants to do that math?
Not me.
Me, I'm not doing the math. I went through college without taking one math course, okay?
16 pages.
Not bad, right?
That's not too bad. No.
Yeah,
Um, but I agree with Nancy. 5,000 words. It sounds like it's a lot, and it's kind of mind-boggling.
yeah, yeah. I know people who write 5,000 words a day. Hard to keep it up day after day, but if this is where I think I'm taking myself, so that's what I want to do, and that's what I plan to do. So there are a number of different projects I have in mind. The first book that I wrote in this new series about Tootsie Goldberg, which I'm happy to talk about. The second book that I am just finishing. I already have my idea in place for the third book. Tootsie is, you could probably ask Nancy because she's very familiar with with Tootsie, since Nancy and I are critique partners. Um, but this character is probably the first character that I've written who people have actually said to me, I can hear you talking when you write that dialogue. So, I think part of it is because why I wrote the book was because it was close to how I feel about things. Everything that I write has a purpose. It's not just um, it's not a piece of fluff. I mean, if you're going to get any place with your writing, in my mind, there has to be an underlying um, there has to be something that is underneath it that props it up, that gives it reason for being. So in the case of the first Tootsie book, which by the way has a name, When She Gets Hot,
Okay.
is a book about a woman who's an older female protagonist, which is pretty nervy for me to do because there aren't too many of them. But I will, in a moment, tell you why I decided to go in this direction. But she spent 30 years of her life avoiding the person that she told herself she wanted to be. And then there's something happens which causes her to remember. And of course, for the about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the book, she fights it until she realizes this is what I'm supposed to be doing with the rest of my life. And along the way, she does things that nobody else would do. By that, I mean I wouldn't do. I actually think that she's me without the guardrails. She does things that I wish I had the guts to do. And she speaks up, and she doesn't care who she says what she says to. And she gets herself in trouble. Um, there's I was once criticized for having too many characters in my books, but honestly and truly, I think the people who surround you and who surround us, and the people who are part of our lives, are as interesting as we are. And so there are these characters in my books. And certainly in this book, there's this book, Ramon, you'll appreciate this, um, initially takes place in a radio station. And all the people who are who work at this radio station, it's a classical radio station. The radio station gets bought by some, what other way to say it, but some very bad people who have mayhem in their minds. And she knows something is wrong, something happened that shouldn't have happened, and she sets out to set it straight. And she's my character Tootsie finds her way, and in it, I make use of probably the seminal event of my life, which is the Holocaust, even though I did not experience it obviously directly. I was born here. Um, my family did not lose anybody. Some distant relatives, yes, but we didn't know them. Um, I know of them now. I made it my business to find out about them. And um, I wanted to incorporate what the meaning of the Holocaust is for a woman like Tootsie, whose grandmother was a survivor, whose grandmother was a partisan, whose grandmother made Molotov cocktails, but she can't make chicken soup. Um, the challenge for me was to write the story the way I write everything that I write, which is with, I would say humor, but I'm not sure that that's the right word, with snark, with sarcasm, with deprecation, with what I hope is a soft touch, because you can. I think what I want to cite as an example of how you do that, and I'm certainly not putting myself in these two men's shoes because they were brilliant. One is Mel Brooks, Springtime for Hitler. You want to make fun of somebody, you want to diminish their power, you make people laugh at them. And certainly if you should go on YouTube if you want to see the um, the song and dance that these two characters who were trying to flim flam so that they would, I can't remember the whole premise. They either had to lose money or they had to make money if their play flopped or something like this. So they come up with this outrageous idea that they're going to do a story about Hitler and make it funny in a way, or make it farcical. Okay, so go to YouTube and just key in Springtime for Hitler, and you'll see the reaction of the audience at first and then what happens. So I thought to myself, I got to tell this. I want to tell this story about someone who was impacted by the Holocaust, but I want to do it in a way that is not heavy handed. Um, and then also because there's nothing I can say that is new or that's fresh about the Holocaust. Everything in my mind that's has been said, or if it's going to be said, will be said by somebody who will be brilliant. And I don't count myself in that category. But I felt like it was part of it was I wanted to write a story about a Jewish character, um, but I didn't want to write it heavy-handed, and I didn't want to write it as how should I say it? Not as a caricature, but it's almost like uh, I wanted it to write it as if to point out to people maybe in Nebraska who haven't never met anybody who's Jewish that there's nothing different about people who are Jewish than people who are Methodists or Catholic or Sikhs or Hindus or Muslims. You know, we're all, what did Shakespeare say? We all bleed red or something. I'm sure that's not what he said, but I think you know what I mean. So the book was wonderful for me to write. I had an amazing time getting her into such trouble, this Tootsie. I mean, the moment the story starts, she's getting dressed to go to work, and her ex-husband calls her to wish her a happy half century. She's 50 years old, right? And almost immediately she gets her first really serious hot flash. So there's when she gets hot, because I mean, he's pissing her off by wishing her a happy half century. She tells herself to get over that part of it because he's out of her life. And then she has this physical reaction, right? And then she goes to this radio station where she's working, and she finds out it's been sold by some very underhanded people under terrible, underhanded circumstances. And she knows, though she's never really stood up because of this thing that happened in the past, she knows that nobody else is standing up. She's got to be the one to do it. And she does. And that whole scene is madcap. People are running around banging on walls and uh, screaming and yelling and all kinds of things. And just writing even that part of the book was a lot of fun, and developing it, and also adding, for those who think that I have gone too far away from my romantic start, there is a guy. And of course, Tootsie and he couldn't be more opposite if they tried. I think I can boil it down in one little sentence. She believes in justice. He believes in the law. He's a cop. And not only that, but he's 12 years younger than she is. So we have um, what I thought was an interesting dynamic. The second book, the one that I'm just finishing the edit on, has her realizing ultimately that now that she's not working at a radio station anymore, what is she going to do with the rest of her life? And she decides she's going to be a hellraiser. So when I say hellraiser, with somebody in situations where hell needs to be raised, uh, and she only decides that's what she wants to be about 3/4 of the way through the book. Up until then, she has, I don't know, just a whole bunch of different things going on. So I don't know what that tells you, but that's where I'm at with my career right now.
Okay. Well, that's a lot. And thank you for kind of a little bit of information on what the Tootsie story that you're working on now. I've read the first 2 chapters and I'm looking forward to reading some more because you left it at a bit of a cliffhanger at that end of the second chapter. And I think I read the other day that you said a little bit more is coming out. So I'm like looking forward to reading a little more.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned Tootsie's grandmother, Hannah, how and how important her backstory. Can you tell us a little more about Hannah and how you were able to like include her and her backstory in this comedic novel?
So first of all, I gave her the name Hannah because that was my aunt's name, who was an extraordinary woman. And she was a bit of a hellraiser herself. I don't think I even know the half of it based upon some of the little stories that I heard. But there is nothing in particular that led me to um, build Hannah the way I did, because I've been reading Holocaust literature my entire life, even probably when I shouldn't have been, when I was a kid, and probably didn't understand it. But and that's why I said that it is the seminal event of my life. I don't spend too many weeks where I don't think about it in some way or another. But I wanted Hannah to be um, Tootsie's guiding light. I wanted her to be the reason that Tootsie does what she does, because there's a dynamic between Tootsie and her mother and her mother and her grandmother, and part of this is based upon the history, the things that I do know about first in generation survivors. So people who survived the Holocaust, the literature tells us that there's a range of emotion that they go through. One, they're guilty that they survived, okay, because they lost everybody. They, if they have children, they could have thought of them in a number of different ways. They could have thought of them as replacements for people who they lost. They could have wrapped them in cotton wool to keep anything from happening to them. because they were petrified that something would happen, or they would be witnesses. And by that I mean they would make it their life's project to tell the story of the Holocaust to anybody and everybody who would listen. So Hannah is that last person. And what does that do to the relationship between her and her daughter, her only daughter, Tootsie's mother? And I gave her the name Francine because I thought it was, I don't know why, Francine just spoke to me. That name spoke to me. And Francine deeply resents her mother because she feels that while her mother was busy being a witness to what happened, she didn't want to have anything to do with raising her. So all the things that she wanted that her friends had, she didn't get from her mother. So there's this resentment that filters into the story and impacts what happens to Hannah, and which Tootsie never forgives her mother for. So what is that thing? I'm going to let you wait until you read the rest of it. But you know, the way I built Hannah as a character was that she lived in a little farming community in Poland when the Nazis came, and they rounded everybody up in the town square. And I made this kind of as in a laughing kind of way. Obviously, it was not. Is that she was standing at the back and she slipped away into the woods. Everybody else ended up, as I call it, on the Auschwitz Express. And she joined a partisan group. And that whole business that I just started to say to you, that she could make a Molotov cocktail, but she couldn't make chicken soup. Tootsie actually, when she tells this guy, this cop, whose name is Steve, about her grandmother, she does this in this very kind of joking way about the fact that she couldn't make a meatball that wasn't like a rock, but she could make a Molotov cocktail. And so that when her grandmother dies, and Tootsie is burdened with guilt, feeling that somehow or another she was responsible, which she was not, but she feels that way, then that is the motivation for why she walks away from doing anything that might hurt somebody else for 30 years. So you could say there are two elements to how I built Hannah, the character, that I will share with you. One of them is there's a wonderful book that came out last year called The Light of Day, about women in the ghettos and women in partisan groups, what they did, both the ones who lived and the ones who died. And it was a range of stuff. It could be as mundane as making sure that the kids in the ghetto had classes to go to, or as scary as being a courier, or shooting people, or blowing up bridges. And the other was that one of my daughters-in-law, her grandfather was a survivor, and he did end up in the woods. His father was killed in front of him. His mother and his sister went to Auschwitz. And in some way, in Hannah, I'm honoring him, and I'm honoring those women whose lives, they're just people who had to rise to the occasion, and did, and sometimes lost their lives, and sometimes they survived. And even when they survived, PTSD, yeah. So I don't know whether that answers your question. I think it does.
Yes. Yes. Explain how Tootsie explains her backstory, Hannah's backstory, but kind of explaining how it filters into her life.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, because there's a mantra that Tootsie lives by. She tried to bury it for a long time. Her grandmother always said to her, "Do the right thing." And in fact, that is a mantra of my life, which is do the right thing, which is really hard sometimes to know what the right thing is. There are characters in my other books who how they live is by doing the right thing. Is it heavy-handed? Is it serious? No, it's not. But ultimately they do what they're supposed to do, and that means the right thing. I don't know how good I am at writing people who don't do the right thing, because I'm also of the opinion that everybody has redeeming qualities. Foolish me, because I don't think that everybody, seriously, my head tells me that not everybody has redeeming qualities, but I want to think that people do.
It's a good way to look at the world. And you mentioned that Tootsie's older. How was it writing an older heroine for your new series versus your previous books?
So at the end of the day, it's probably easier to write somebody who's closer in my age than writing about somebody who's 30. I It's interesting. I've had conversations with my critique partners about things that you wouldn't think about. Like, I think I in the very first scene, Tootsie puts a hole through her tights because it's January. She's getting dressed and she sticks her foot in. And as we all know, we women know that you can, if the nail is just not cut the right way, it can put a hole in the thing and you can't wear 'em. So one of my critique partners says, "Oh, people don't wear anything on their legs." And I'm saying, even in January? So then I had to have a conversation with a number of other people who were age 50 or thereabouts, because I wanted to take a survey. And some people do. Some people wear tights and some people don't. Some people go, their legs are bare ass naked. I don't know. It's hard to know who does what. So, but for me to understand somebody who's 30, um, maybe not so easy, right? But 50, I can remember 50. It's not that long ago. Maybe.
So I'm going with it's easier, um,
And
and is it
I
more
want
fun?
to I want to add one thing to that, because I think it's really important. One of the things people said to me was, "You're crazy to write an older female protagonist." And I'm thinking, yeah, I probably am. Except there's a whole universe of baby boomers and Gen Xers out there who are interested in reading about somebody who's their age, as opposed to some 25-year-old whose life and life choices they may not relate to. So I'm taking a chance. I could be way out on a limb that somebody's going to cut off, or I could be right. We'll see.
I think there's just not enough books out there, so yay you that you decided to write it. Um, I'm gonna guess it was more fun to write the older character.
It was just very fun to write this character. She just does things that are crazy. I mean, I'm far from it right now. By that I mean I'm not. Um, it's a long. I wrote it last year, so it's not top of mind for me. But I mean, things like when she decides that. Since nobody is speaking up at this meeting where they get told that the radio station is being sold, um, and she wants somebody to stand up and say, "Listen, what's going on? This is wrong. You didn't do this the right way," and nobody will. So she gets up and she stands up on a chair, and she does one of these whistles. When I can't do one of these whistles, but she did one when she was a child. So she's really excited because she didn't lose the ability to do one of these whistles. Okay. Um, And she, she speaks very frankly to these people. Would I do that? I don't think so. But in my heart, I'd like to think that I would, even though I know I wouldn't. Or when she tries to break into the radio station at midnight because she thinks that she's going to find information that will prove that the station had been sold in a bogus way. And what happens, but this same cop um, who she's given him a name because of what he wears. She calls him Black Windbreaker. He's there to stop her because he's he's working as private security, and the new owners of the radio station wanted somebody there 24/7, and one of his people was sick, so he's filling in. And he says to her when when she sneaks in, "What are you doing here?" And of course she turns around and says, "What are you doing here?" um, in other words, I guess if offense is the best defense. And she says things like, "All right, I know that this is breaking and entering, and my friend Fern is here, but don't get her in trouble because you haven't seen her." He says, "But now I know she's there because you just told me." But it's hard for me to remember all the things that I wrote then. There are just a lot of scenes that are um, meant to make you laugh. There's a and I gave her my age. Actually, she's 80 years old. There's a woman who is part of the solution that Tootsie and Steve come along and meet about three-quarters of the way through the book. And they meet her under very strange circumstances that will startle you and make you laugh. I'm not going to tell you. I don't want to tell you. Uh, you have to read it. Uh, and by the way, it's probably going to be out. I think that now, uh, and I think you and I wanted me to talk about traditional publishing as opposed to self-publishing, which I can. Um, this book is now going to, the way I see it, is going to be out in January, to be followed by that second book within a couple of months, so that I have some um, continuity read through. There are all kinds of there's all kinds of terms that people use to when they talk about um, people reading more of your work. But I've decided to self-publish all of my work from now on going forward. I am not going the traditional published route for very specific reasons.
Okay. Is care to elaborate or no?
Sure, no, I'm fine with elaborating. So I decided to give it a chance. Um, this book is a really good book. I think other books that I've published are also very good. One of the issues in the world of publishing today is that, and I'm not sure I'm right with my figures right now, but that um, about 3 million books are published every year. On average, most books have 10 or less readers, people who buy their books, 10 or less. They sell 10 or less books. I'm not in that category. I've sold many more than that. But to get noticed, to do the marketing, and it's hilarious because that's my professional, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. I am in the midst of doing it. And part of the business of writing fast is that does help in the sale of stories. But for this very kind of short period, I decided I was going to try to publish traditionally with Tootsie. So I queried 55 agents. I sent a query letter along with, depending on what they want, anywhere from, each one was different, from 5 pages to, from just the query letter to the query letter in 5 pages, query letter synopsis 10 pages, 20 pages, what's called a partial, meaning the first 3 chapters, bio, uh, where do you see this book being sold? What's the demographic? I mean, agents asked a variety of different questions, and each query letter that I sent out took 15, 20 minutes or sometimes more to do. I mean, I have a folder with anything that anybody could have asked me at the end of the day, and all I did was I just socked in whatever it was that they were looking for. And I have gotten, I would say, at this point, about 20 rejections. I have one woman who wants me to wait until January, um, and if she loved the story, but she really didn't get a chance to read it all the way through. Could I wait until January? And I'm thinking, all right, whatever. In the because I was in the midst of it then, okay. And then I started to think about this, and I had a conversation with a colleague. If I found an agent who said today, "Oh my God, I love this story. I think it'll make a tremendous splash, and I have just the editor at just the publishing house that it would work at." And she or he contacted that editor, and oh my God, they loved it, and they offered me a contract, and all this happened today. Okay. Here's what happens. If you get an offer in advance, and by in advance, I mean a sum of money that the publishing house offers you as part of the contractual relationship, they don't pay that advance out to you all at once. And I'm not entirely sure of the whole process, but it doesn't even matter, because what I'm telling you is they dole it out. They give you a quarter of it when you sign your contract, and then through the process, up until the point when it's published, they give you the rest. So if you get an advance of $3,000, which would not be so unusual to get, because publishing houses are not being very generous today, certainly with people like me, who's an unknown, right? I'm not James Patterson. They may give a 7-figure advance to him. So if I get 25% of that $3,000 on signing my contract, you can do the numbers. Even if I didn't take math in college, I can do the numbers on that, okay, for a year's worth of work, okay? And then there's a process where it goes through an edit process. All kinds of other things happen. There's a cover that has to be okay. There's galleys that have to be gone over, and there's a publishing date that's put into place because they have production schedules, these publishing houses. So today, if I got a deal, my book wouldn't be published until 2024. I'm not willing to wait around for that, especially because it's a fairly known fact that most publishing houses do not help you with the marketing. You're still supposed to be doing, the writer, the author, is still supposed to be doing their own marketing. And then if somehow or another you earn out your advance, the amount of money that you get in royalties on the sale of your book is so minuscule that it's almost embarrassing to mention. Something in the range of 8 cents. Doesn't seem quite fair, right? And under those circumstances, I'm willing to take my chances with myself. So that was a decision that I made based upon information that I felt was important for me to have. So no, I'm not going to be traditionally published. Decision made.
Okay. And a lot of information on the whole process, and the rationale behind going the independently published route.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are that does not mean that I can't sell a book to Barnes and Noble, in Barnes and Noble, or for people who have what is it called, Nook, the Nook, or that I can't sell not a hardcover but a paperback. And there's no reason why Barnes and Noble can't carry my books if they come through I forget what the word is, distributor. um, that will, where Barnes and Noble could get their books, my books from them. But mostly people buy books online now and they buy them from Amazon. That's the story. The greatest part of books are sold through Amazon. I can't say the percentage, but
Oh, no, we know. Libraries, yes.
oh, well, I bet you do. Yeah,
We many books that we can't get that we've had to turn to, having an account with Amazon to get those books.
yeah,
Um, so I have to ask, so when are we going to get a little more of Tootsie? I mean, you said January is,
yeah,
you probably see the all of book one,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. I need to hire somebody to do my cover. That's where I'm at. And the second book, I'm in the process of hiring an editor, and then a proofreader, and then somebody to format it, and then somebody to do the cover. There's expense. There's no question about it. So the idea is, if I want to make a career out of being a published author, then I have to be good at a lot of other things besides just writing a book. And that's a challenge. That's a big challenge in a very crowded marketplace. But if you're going to, but I will say this: I actually tried not to write because I thought to myself, it is so hard. Um, it's not as hard now as it was because I cut myself slack. But in the beginning, where my craft was not what it needed to be, I agonized over everything. And I would say to myself, what am I doing? Who, am I crazy? What is this that I'm doing? And I remember one time in particular, I said, I'm just not going to write. This is crazy. I'm not going to write. And I think I didn't write for about 2 months. And then I could not. I'm a storyteller. That's who I am. And I have chosen to be a storyteller by writing stories. So at least I know that, right?
yes, yes, absolutely. Nancy says we call ourselves authorpreneurs nowadays. I have to
Yeah.
say, yeah, that's I don't think people realize. I mean, come to a library, go to a bookstore. I don't think people realize what percentage of books um, are put out by the big publishers, and there's a handful of them only, by those publishers, and how many books they actually put out each month, each week, and how many they promote. A
Yeah.
lot. Um, so Laura has a question. What percent of your motivation is making money, and what percent is putting yourself out there?
So, sharing my ideas. I actually, if I think of myself as well, I do think of myself as a storyteller, and then I think of myself, well, what would it be like if I were, sitting in front of a campfire and um, telling a story. Um, I think it's the entertainment part of it that I enjoy. The Nancy and I have talked about humor and about having it or not having it. Um, I'm not sure where it comes from, but there are things that come into my head that are so weird and so odd. And sometimes it's just a different way of looking at something than the way other people look at it. And it makes people laugh. So it's not so much, I think, about ideas as it is about entertainment, if that makes any sense. But in terms of making making a living as a writer, something that's very hard to do, but not impossible. because self-publishing shows you the way. There are all kinds of things. One of the reasons that I'm on TikTok is, believe it or not, you can sell books on TikTok. I haven't sold many yet, but I have. I mean, I know it for a fact because I'm not doing any other kind of promotions. And I will do a TikTok about one of the books that I've already published. And lo and behold, the next day on my dashboard on Amazon, somebody's bought a book or two. So yeah, I'm not I'm not writing for the sake of writing, although it is what I love, but I am writing to make money. So I'm not sure that it is a total answer to what Laura asked.
Okay. I will ask anyone who wants to ask Miriam any questions. If you would type it into the chat, I will pose the question to her. So, I mean, it's fascinating to me. I don't know, earlier today, and kind of probably still on my computer, I'm on what's called Library Journals, their Librarians Day or something. And it's incredible how many books, and there's definitely promotion behind them. But if they're picking just a handful, and I see your point, like, traditional publishing takes so long. And you would be like, if you finished the book last year, you would be how many books into the series before the first one actually makes it to out into the hands of the public?
Yeah, that's right. So it was, and should I be dishonest about the fact that I'm at a point in my life where, yeah, Methuselah lived until he was 900, right? I don't think I'm going to make it that long. So if I want to do the things that I said that I wanted to do with my life, even though I've been slow at doing them, then I'm going to do them at my pace, and I'm not going to wait around for somebody else to, for somebody else's schedule to determine how I do what I do. And I didn't have that much confidence in that for a very long period of time. And maybe there is something to be said for getting to a certain point in your life where you say to yourself, screw it, that's what I'm going to do.
How many books do you foresee writing about Tootsie?
I'm not sure. I'm sure that I have many ideas of what kind of trouble she can get into, because she will. But right now there's the one that's finished, the one that is in edit process, and the third one that is in my brain that is starting to percolate. And then there's a fourth one that I have a one sentence idea for. So let's say there are at least four, but I'm also planning on another series which I have just now decided to do, that will be shorter books, probably in the range of 20 to 25,000 words, and very different than what I've written so far. And then finishing a couple of series that I've left unfinished. It's a lot of work, and I have big dreams to do it all. And hopefully I can get it all done. But in terms of Tootsie, 4 right now.
And if you had to pick a genre, what would you say Tootsie falls under?
Yeah, I'm not wild about that. People want to call it women's fiction because women's fiction involves a woman's growth, how she changes, how she improves her life, and all that. But you know what? That's the traditional publishing world's way of looking at it, and that kind of pigeonholes things. It's easy for them. I don't think it's very easy for anybody else.
I don't agree with them with genres. I mean, we don't put labels on books here, because I've always argued, but they could fall into 3 or 4 different spots in the building.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Harry Potter. I mean, who is Harry Potter written for, right? Don't you know a lot of adults who have read Harry Potter, for goodness sakes, right? Why? Because J.K. Rowling is a good storyteller.
Yes. I'm going to say thank you. Thank you to Miriam.
Sure.
It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, always. Always. And if anybody wants to find any of my books, you can find me on Amazon. Yeah, Miriam Allenson. Just key me in.
I look forward to not just more chapters, but the first book. I definitely enjoyed the first 2 chapters and look forward to reading the rest.
Thank you very much, Janette. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.